Well, hello, my friends. We meet again. It has been a while. Where should we begin? Now, today we are diving into what I consider to be the biggest blunder in metal crowdfunding ever. A story worthy of Hellenic tragedy. The story contains hubris, crisis, silence, success, and heartbreak. Hard-earned money was squandered, and it took a troll to finally get the band to break their silence. Yet ultimately, this is a story of redemption, where one man took it upon himself to complete that which was left undone. This is the story of Corelia. So in 2011, my first year of high school, a little EP was dropped and it caused a little bit of a stir. Around this time, metal was really starting to get exciting with so many new young bands experimenting with different sounds, right? The gent, prog, metal movement was really in full force. And it was honestly just a really exciting time to be a metalhead. And amongst the cacophony of genting prog bands coming out of this time, Corelia always stood out to me. They would release an EP called Nostalgia, and at the time, that EP felt sort of anything but nostalgic. It really was very forward-looking and modern sounding. It even sounds not even dated today. Like, it just sounds really good, right? Tell me, my friend, what can you see? It gented just enough to be lumped into that first wave of gent bands, but to me, these guys weren't a gent band at all. I was sort of more like post-metal, prog metal, like BT Bam, Periphery, and Rush, maybe mixed all together, and one very smooth, elegant, and very beautiful package. A real highlight for me was singer Ryan Devlin, who showed just fantastic range and versatility throughout the album, and even Spencer Sotelo features on it. But more on Ryan in just a bit here, guys. Now, the album is actually still a fantastic listen today, and due to circumstances which we were about to discuss, it feels painfully innocent and naive, right? That now today, the title Nostalgia fits the whole thing eerily well, right? Nostalgia coming from the Greek words nostos, which came from Homeric Greek meaning homecoming, and algos meaning pain, right? So nostalgia means homecoming pain. Alanis Morissette couldn't have written irony any better than this story Nostalgia New Orleans does, right? If you never listened to this EP, go listen to it right now. Right now! And while you're doing it, why not give the video a like if you enjoy the content? It really helps out myself and the channel. Thanks, boys. I really, really appreciate all of you. Now, the EP did well and certainly got some eyes on the band, with vocalist Ryan Devlin actually filling in on vocals for the Human Abstract during that time where their singer had left right after the band came out. Which, by the way, if you guys want a video on the Human Abstract, one of my favorite bands of all time, please let me know. So underrated. But here is where we begin to see something weird going on, right? Everything was going well, but why wasn't this band signed to a record label, right? The band did sign to a management company, but why no record label or deal? It couldn't have been due to a lack of connections, as they had Spencer Sotelo feature on the album, right? The singer himself toured with Human Abstract and Periphery and even Suicide Silence. They had a music video done by Revolver magazine, and according to Wikipedia, they actually had a lot of brand endorsements as well. So it just seems strange that they were never signed, right? And even a year later, they supported Misery Signals in 2013. So what gives, right? This is during the peak of the gent prog craze of the early 2010s. Bands had been signed for making like a single shitty Taylor Swift cover and posting it to YouTube. So again, like I ask, why weren't these guys signed? Maybe there was some sort of inner animosity, or maybe things were a little bit weird and people were hesitant. Now, we would eventually find out why, which would then be a fateful data point in the black box of the band's wreckage. However, at the same time, a band named Protest the Hero did something which turned many, many heads in the metal world, actually. Protest the Hero, one of my favorite bands of all time. I think I've seen them like 9 or 10 times live. But here, essentially, Protest the Hero would start this sort of crowdfunding movement, meta, craze, whatever you want to call it, in around 2012, with the recording and production of their 4th album, which eventually became known as Volition, right? The Volition crowdfunding was just like a massive, massive success, raising over 125,000 Canadian dollars, which at that time was worth a lot of money, exceeding all expectations and enabling Protest the Hero to skip all the record label bullshit which had plagued them and to release an album on their own Well, like on their own volition, right? That's in the title. Now, this album is also really, really good and incredible, so please go check it out. But what I think happened, right, is the guys in Corelia would have taken notice of this, and thus they formed their own plan to skip the record label industry bullshit and to craft their own record exactly as they wanted, right? They weren't being refused by record labels. They were refusing record labels because they had seen Protest the Hero's success and were going to use it as a model for their own going forward, I think is what was going on there, right? So I'm sure the guys in Corelia would have certainly taken notice of this, and thus they formed their own plan to also skip the record label industry bullshit and to craft their own record exactly as they wanted. You know, a noble cause, to be sure, and with the recent grand success of Protest the Hero, it must have seemed like this would have been like the way forward, right? The new way for bands to do it. I certainly thought maybe at the time it was too, right? A new way for the prog metal scene to get themselves funding for records without being beholden to someone else, and they can make whatever they want. Or so they thought, right? Now, I've never been signed to a record deal, but I assume a record deal comes with many drawbacks. You guys have probably all heard the stories, and I won't deny that at all, right? But so does a crowdfunding campaign, right? Instead of one boss at a record label who will be pissed off and disappointed if you don't deliver, now you have potentially thousands of bosses who will be disappointed. Individual people who actually have a financial stake, so to speak, in you delivering upon the promises set out in your campaign, right? A record label also provides something which a crowdfunding campaign does not, right? A hard deadline at the risk of litigation if the contract is breached, which is a harsh, if not necessary, evil for some artists who, given an infinite amount of time, really have a hard time delivering on something as perfectionism comes into play and you keep second guessing yourself. Whereas if you have a hard deadline, you sort of just have to say, okay, that's good enough and hand it in, right? A record label also comes with many other connections, expertise, people who know how to do things as well. So, you know, it's a big trade-off here. Protest the Hero, in their case, they were already an experienced band, so they knew all that stuff. I assume they had all these connections, whereas Corelia, they hadn't even released a debut LP at the time. So, you know, you can kind of see as they maybe naively went into this, but anyways. Thus, with this newfound confidence and vigor from seeing the success of Protest the Hero, Corelia would post a video starting their own crowdfunding campaign on January 21st, 2015. Now, the video and the Indiegogo page are actually both still up and available for you guys to go check out, which is kind of funny. I actually remember seeing this video shortly after its release in 2015. Now, I never contributed to this campaign, as at the time I was a completely broke university student, hopelessly addicted to League of Legends, but I remember it generating a bit of a buzz, and I always laugh looking back at this video, right? Ryan Devlin, Clayton Pratt, the drummer, and Chris Dower, the guitarist and primary songwriter of the band, are the only three guys here, and all three of them look like they're being held hostage at gunpoint. They just look so uncomfortable. And it also looks like they went out and bought like the most ill-fitting dress shirts they possibly could. Like they just went straight to Mark's Work Warehouse or wherever before filming the video. Now, in the video, they detail how they've been hard at work for the last few years since the release of Nostalgia and had accumulated over 90 minutes of material, which would be split up into one double album, which would be called New Wilderness. Now, on the Indiegogo site, there are a few quotes, which I think sort of aptly describe the band's mindset at the time here in 2015. Quote, "We saw no substantial reason to rush out a debut LP or to subscribe to the label industry trend of releasing a persistent stream of albums when it was obvious to us that all the future success of our band was going to be based around releasing records that live up to the highest quality of our artistic standards." End quote. A very, I don't want to say overly confident here, but there is a lot of confidence in themselves, maybe a lot of naivete, right? You don't need to be releasing 90 minutes of music, right? 45 minutes and a really good record will still get you those results. You know what I mean? And then a little bit later on the post, they would add, quote, "Investing in this campaign should be fundamentally viewed as advanced pre-ordering, meaning that all customers will be gratified with a digital download of the album upon its release, in conjunction with or without a variety of other perks and incentives of the investor's choice." It's interesting how they chose investor. Interesting choice of language here. "This method of business effectively negates the need for us to be bound to or indebted to any outside entities in having the cost of our album funded, with the kicker being that its investors have faith in what they're paying for will be of desired quality." And let's be honest here. Did you guys and gals ever really doubt us? And man, the irony stings just about more than any bullet ant could muster here. It's just so palpable. Alongside the mission statement, the band would have various tiers of support, ranging from $15, we just get the album, all the way to $600 super tier, which two poor souls ended up contributing towards. Brutal. Alongside other various tiers, which will come with various pieces of merch. All looks pretty nice, I gotta say. And I also need to say, I don't think I've ever seen a band offer a cloak for merch. Really like that. And I think we as a society should bring back capes and cloaks. Those things are base as hell to keep you warm out of the weather. Anyways, bring back cloaks. For their efforts, the band raised a very, very respectable $33,000 US, which for being an unsigned, still relatively unknown prog metal band was very, very successful. And they actually blew past the original goal of $15K in just over a day. It was just very, very exciting time, and judging by the band's posts on Indiegogo, they were absolutely over the moon and eager to start recording the album. And I remember seeing those updates saying they had reached all the money. I thought it was sick. They would post several updates in 2015, including one in May announcing the completion of the drum tracking and having the guitar tracking beginning in June, and several posts mentioning vocals being tracked, and even one post in July of that year, which featured several Indiegogo supporters coming to meet the band, I assume in San Diego, and do choir vocals, which I must say is just like a really, really cool idea. But man, how disappointed must those guys have felt? Goddamn. By the way, this must be like the most 2015 looking photo I've ever seen. If there's any Zoomers here or Gen Alphas, that's what it looked like back then. However, after these updates in the summer of 2015, storm clouds would begin to gather on the horizon as the band would go 3 months now without a single update of any kind on any of their social medias. Very, very sus, honestly. Only then to drop a multi-paragraph grenade in October. Now, most of the stuff here is kind of just cope regarding the silence of social media and setting up merch and LLCs and all that stuff. You know, stuff, of course, which a record label would have greatly assisted the band in. And honestly, anybody who says they don't have time to post on social media, you do, myself included. You just don't want to, and that's okay. But just tell us you don't really want to. Tell us you're just focusing on it. You know what I mean? You don't need to be so avant-garde and, you know, on your high horse about it, I suppose. Right, and this sort of kind of dismissive attitude, you know, this high horse dismissive attitude, I think really sort of began to rub people the wrong way. And this is only like 6 months after the goal was finished, right? So it wasn't like a huge amount of time. Not like people expected the album to be done in 6 months, but all in all though, mostly understandable stuff. However, there is some very, in hindsight, revealing details included here. Quote, without going into too much detail, the setbacks have consisted of an admitted underestimation of how much time and work goes into recording and preparing a 95+ minute album, especially as an undermanned band creating highly intricate and complex music, several generalized hiccups, including trial and error, which we expected to run into based off our inexperience in creating an album of this size and quality, some honest shit happens type stuff, which occurred in very poor time in regard to our personal lives, and generally not receiving a lot of the help we were expecting and we were told we were going to get. When we initially dove into this massive project, which has slowed down in more ways than one, end quote. So many brackets here. Why are we adding so much extra stuff here? It seems like, you know, when people lie and they just add in way too much detail, like that's kind of what it sounds like going on here. But this post sort of reads to me like a band that is just like way in over their head in perhaps more ways than one, as we will come to see later on. To me, it is like the personalized tidbit which resonates the most here and become the most relevant, which whoever wrote the post seemed to be trying to obscure and hide it by placing it right in the middle of a huge paragraph, or perhaps they're trying to subtly signal something to the public but didn't want to out the person in the band. You know, regardless, the band would make another nothing post a few months later in February 2016, and then it would actually be complete radio silence until almost a year later in October. A year after the big update, they would drop another massive cope-filled post, and this time you could begin to feel how the public perception was beginning to shift and how it was affecting the band. Now, we have to remember that during this time, 2016, 2017, there's actually just like tons of swindlers peddling garbage using crowdfunding during this time. So in addition to the band's radio silence, public perception towards crowdfunding in general was changing in a massive negative way, right? The Corelia scam began to make its way into the metal zeitgeist. And in October of that year, they were actually dropped by their management as well, citing the band's inability to complete their project. And maybe that is what spurred the 2016 final post. And it was so defensive and antagonistic to the people that supported it, and rightfully had gotten angry over the silence, right? The section on making an artistic statement by not using social media absolutely just reeks of massive copium and pride, right? But there's one paragraph in hindsight which was a massive understatement. Quote, on top of a strategic attempt to take our time and to not rush something we poured our souls into for years, there have been many setbacks. Several aspects of the record have been completely re-recorded multiple times due to our determination to make things as great as they can be, and there have been several big occurrences that have held us back, which we truly wish we could discuss, but refused to during our decision to take the high road. Interesting choice of words there. All the tribulations we've endured throughout this process have been a massive learning experience and have essentially forced us to develop skills and know-how that will undoubtedly ensure a healthy future for Corelia, end quote. Very, very, very interesting and revealing language here. It seemed like at this time, through these messages, that whatever it was the band was going through, they seemed very, very reluctant to discuss, despite how seemingly disastrous it was for them. And another very interesting point here, for a healthy Corelia, that could only mean one of two things, right? Serious physical or mental health crises. However, after this post, Corelia would completely fall off the face of the earth for nearly 4 years, much to the dismay and disappointment of all the crowdfunding supporters, and much to the ridicule and derision of the metal community at large. Corelia and the crowdfunding campaign simply became just another data point in the ever-growing list of failed crowdfunding campaigns. I can't believe iDubbbz didn't make a video about it. They were ridiculed and lambasted all over the social media pages by people who were absolutely rightfully angry. No updates, and the only sign of life in the Corelia camp was singer Ryan Devlin posting on his personal Twitter account, although every post he made there resulted in endless angry replies over the whole debacle, and I think they've all since been deleted. And I mean, rightfully so, right? It had already been 2 years, lack of communication, and as the years and time went on, it only became less and less acceptable, and any sort of charity that people had towards the band completely ran out, and Corelia was just a complete laughing stock, one of the most hated bands in metal, I could probably say at that point in time. And I can't imagine that what that perception, public image was doing to Corelia themselves, their own mental health, which was already challenged by this. And so it was not until the spring 2020 COVID pandemic, all of a sudden everyone was sitting at home with nothing to do, and this is when life started to stir in the Corelia camp and they broke their silence. I remember this actually very clearly. In April of that year, someone had created a new Corelia band page under the name Corelias. In the post, which had now since been deleted, and the page as well, it stated that band inner fighting had completely derailed the release of the album and that they had enough and they were going to release the entire incomplete version of it for everyone to see on April 20th, 2020. Very trollish date if ever there was. Now, this account was actually not owned by any of the band members, and in fact, it was later confirmed to be an elaborate troll from metal producer Tin Offsenfort, who, in maybe one of the most successful acts of trolling in metal, managed to get Corelia to break their silence to address what happened. Really a genius move here, which they did on April 21st. Now, I'm not going to read the whole post here, but to cut to the chase, the band outlined that in 2016, one of their members had a severe and seemingly permanent mental health crisis, which caused all work to completely stall on the album. Fast forward to 2019, and this person, who we will get to in just a bit here, guys, completely cut off contact from the band, so that when the fake Corelia account threatened to post what was left, the band members who were left in the band assumed that this was the person who had cut themselves off and were thus checkmated. Hilarious, incredible troll, by the way. So they were forced to break their silence, lest the other band member do it first and throw them under the bus and tell his side of the story, I guess is what they were fearing. The band then apologized for the terrible way they handle things, blah, 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 and promised partial refunds, which to their credit, apparently they did do, so gotta give them some credit there, but most of the money was gone. Then another complete surprise announcement a week or so later, the band announced they would actually be releasing the album as is, which was, in their words, quote, demo quality. You know, at last clarity, right? There was an album all along. I remember feeling sort of vindicated in my belief that there was something going on. I don't know. I never was that mad, probably because I never contributed any of my own money, which definitely skewed my opinion of things. But, you know, I liked Corelia. I was cheering for them. I was stoked when I heard about that news. Now, I know like a lot of people were angry and still are, and rightfully so. But to me, this is when it went from being a slimy, scammy crowdfunding campaign to a terrible tragedy for all parties here. All right, so now here is where we get to put on our speculation hats. None of what I'm about to say or postulate about has been confirmed officially by the band in any way, but in my mind and to others online, this is all but sort of confirmed, right? The album was released in what I would say a mostly complete state. None of it was mixed, but all the drum parts were done, bass, vocals. Most of the rhythm guitars were also done, but a lot of the leads were unfinished in the place. They had like MIDI or Guitar Pro, whatever sounds they used as placeholders to write. Now, in all the crowdfunding videos they posted, we only saw the 3 members we mentioned earlier. Ryan, Clayton, and Chris, right? Singer, drummer, guitarist. I assume the other two guys were more or less hired guns, not really involved in the writing process, just maybe came by to record their instruments. And judging off the simple fact that it was all the guitar parts left unfinished, and looking at the band, some of the earlier posts citing re-recording of parts, you know, we can sort of blame and sort of start to see the disease of perfectionism here come about. And so I'm just gonna go based off the idea that all the guitar parts were left unfinished, that it was the guitarist who had broken with the band. And I assume, of course, this is, you know, unspecified, that it was Chris Dower. Now, I want to say that mental illness is a very serious topic, and I've had people very close to me go through mental health crises. Some make it out, some don't. And I really shouldn't even say the word blame here at all, but I can't really think of a different word. It's not his fault that he had a mental health crisis of some nature, but regardless, the fact is that he was unable to complete what he promised to do. Thus, the blame rests with him. Now, mental health is not an excuse for being an asshole, but it is a reason. You know, it's just one of those things. Nobody wins, everybody loses. It just sucks and ruins everything despite your best efforts. And of course, it sucks for the individuals themselves who have the unfortunate crisis, but it also seriously affects all the people around them. People aren't just, you know, atoms floating around in space. They are people connected through social relationships, obligations, responsibilities to others and groups, right? So when some person's mental health degrades, it affects a lot of people around them. And like I said, it just happens sometimes, and it just really sucks. Now, I will give 100% credit to the other members of Corelia here. Throughout the whole ordeal, they never once pinned the blame on Chris, although they alluded to some internal things. But for better or worse, they protected their friend at the cost of their own reputations. And I, for one, think that is very noble, if not naive, and I think they do deserve respect for that. However, of course, the multi-year silence was totally inexcusable, and I'm not denying that. This is my headcanon of what happened here. In 2015, this fundraiser was very, very successful. A double-edged sword, as it gave them more money, but infinitely more pressure. Without the hard deadline, resources, and personnel which a record label would have provided, the band was completely on their own and quickly found themselves over their heads, the pressure mounting both inside and out. It is quite clear that this was like a very ambitious piece of work from the beginning, and maybe it was too ambitious for a still inexperienced band, and maybe one album would have been better. But in late 2015, 2016, we get the tellings of recordings and parts done, and mounting personal issues as well. To me, this must have been the first cracks in the dam. You know, latent mental health issues can sort of rear their head in a person's mid-20s, and combined with the incredible pressure, maybe it was just too much for Chris, and I think he would suffer a breakdown sometime in the middle of 2016, probably right around when the band broke their silence, or probably right around the first big silence of Corelia's career. So maybe we could say spring, summer 2016 to try to put a date on it here and make a timeline. This would be the several big occurrences which they refuse to talk about to take the high road. Now, this is all just speculation, right? But I bet this is where it turned from perfectionism to severe mental illness crisis, and perhaps because of this and all the mounting pressure and shitstorm brewing around it, probably caused profound interpersonal issues within the band as well. And to their credit, they didn't out their friend and bandmate, as they easily could have used him as a scapegoat. Gotta respect them for that. And in their last post, the band would say that slow process was continued to be made, probably with a very painful and temperamental process, before in late 2018, 2019, something happened which caused Chris to completely disconnect from the band entirely, leaving Clayton and Ryan as helpless passengers on someone else's journey. Chris, I think, was also the main songwriter, and I can only assume driving engine of the band, so his loss was not replaceable at all, right? I really think that if someone else replaceable, they would have just got a new guitarist to do his parts, but he was Corelia in a sense, and if I had to wager, I bet a lot of the files, branding, and maybe even legal documents surrounding the band were in his possession, kind of held hostage. So then that left the other guys in a very, very precarious position here. Out their friend and bandmate, you know, redeem their own social reputation, but at the cause of a relationship with their friend and probably ending the band forever. Or they could just hope that things would get better while continually ignoring the brewing shitstorm. A wise man once said, "My friend, hope is a prison." And here the band waited in hope's prison until a troll finally forced their hand. Now, of course, I could be totally wrong about what went on here, but this is just my opinion of what I was able to gather with research and being around at the time, reading Reddit posts and stuff. But this whole thing just sort of reminds me a lot of a Greek tale of a boy with wax wings who flew too close to the sun and had them melted and returned to Earth, right? Huge success, big ambitions. We're going to create this massive, successful album. It's going to blow everyone out of the water. And it was too much, too fast. And it caused them to crash down to Earth. Truly just a very, very sad and tragic tale when viewed, right, 6 years after, you know, the album was finally released here now, right? Sort of gives you a different perspective in hindsight. But true to their word, they released the full album. They released all of New Wilderness with fan-made remaster and mixes, and they honestly sounded so bad that I never even bothered to listen to the album at all. However, this all changed in 2023 when this beautiful man here, Alejandro Valdenegro Diaz, decided to painstakingly go over every part of the album and essentially made it his mission to complete the album himself. And well, what an incredible, incredible album. Sir Diaz here deserves the utmost respect, adoration, and recognition for his efforts, right? This album to me now sounds like a fully complete record. I will leave a link to his channel as well as his Patreon here. Mr. Diaz truly worked magic, and I personally want to thank him from the bottom of my heart for finishing this amazing work of art. And in my eyes, this album is just as much his as it is Corelia's now. New Wilderness here is an immense and extremely ambitious piece of prog metal. 2 discs and 90 minutes of some of the best prog I've ever heard, honestly. I can only just describe it as majestic, soaring, beautiful, effervescent, desperate even, right? It expands on the sound established on Nostalgia's expertly and contains some really, really incredible moments and fantastic, fantastic arrangements. Just, I highly, highly recommend you listen to it. I get so many goosebumps, so many different parts. To me, if this album was released in a vacuum, it still would be exceptional. However, the whole context surrounding it when juxtaposed with some of the lyrics and themes is just so incredibly sharp. This album deserves its own video entirely, and maybe one day I will do it, but this album is just so interesting to me. It's just chock full of absolutely gorgeous guitar lines and leads. Some of my favorite ever maybe come from the song Esper Voyage, which is several clean guitar breaks that are just so good. We must thank Alejandro for finishing this, but man, Chris Dower was really a tragic genius. So many great guitar riffs here. Ryan Devlin does a really fantastic job here as well. His singing, better than ever, really reminds me of a young Geddy Lee here. In fact, this whole album is actually loaded with tons of Rush influences. Ryan also gives us some great screams as well. There's some very heavy moments on this album. And some of my favorite Ryan moments comes from the song Up for Air, which features the guitars and vocals sort of floating effervescently on top of the incredible rushing momentum of the drums and bass underneath. Such a fantastic, unique song there. Which, by the way, Clayton's drumming throughout the album is actually fantastic as well. Especially his performance on Spiraling with his tom work, sort of metaphorically representing the spiraling mental state of his bandmates, maybe. And in the post, the band would state that everything was actually written before the crowdfunding campaign, including the lyrics. And man, if these lyrics weren't foreshadowing, I don't really know what else is. It really sounds like a lot of these songs are Ryan pleading to Chris to finish it. And the section of lyrics comes from the song Self-Destruct. Quote, moving forward to find solid ground so we could start, it took not long in life for all I built to come crashing down. From up so high held tightly in my hands, now my hopes are shattered, fragments in the sand. Sometimes someone will come, rip it up, grind to dust, all you've done just for fun, but it's all fine. Some people are doubting without even hearing a plan, conceited, prejudging, they just want to see you fail. Man, truly just like chilling lyrics and an absolutely fantastic song here, by the way. A lot of these songs seem to be sort of destined to be self-referential, and honestly, maybe they even were at the time too. We don't really know. Opener riff seems to be touching on this as well. Once again, it seems I've done nothing. My thoughts are caught up in the stream. Day will come again as I wake at dawn, and though the feeling's gone, I won't give in while I can bleed. In the rift of clarity, you will find a harmony. Through an ocean of deceit, you will find your harmony. End quote. To me, this is just like a really, really incredible album. And I really wonder if Chris Dower had a hand in writing a lot of the lyrics here. Maybe he was talking from personal experience from before, and then it just got worse later. I don't know, man. There are just so many meanings and themes inside. Seems to be referencing the whole situation. A cruel, ironic joke of the universe, if there ever is one. Now, the grand tragedy of New Wilderness is that no matter how good the music is, or how valid, sad, uncontrollable the circumstances were regarding its release, it will always have the miasma of scorned fans fans surrounding it. It is, like I said earlier, you know, one thing to piss off a record label, but it's another thing entirely to disappoint fans who supported you directly and sort of spit in their face with some of these posts. It's just such a shame, as this album's not a scam at all, and while $33K is a lot of money, it's not nearly enough to warrant the probably permanent destruction of one's own musical career and reputation. You know, of course fans lost money, were promised things that were never delivered on, which really sucks. But I really do think it's time that Corelia had its reputation redeemed, as this year marks officially over a decade since the crowdfunding campaign was concluded. This album is just so great, and again, thank you for Alejandro Diaz for completing this album. I highly recommend you check it out. Seriously guys, this album is one of my favorites of all time. I'm not even joking you. I've listened to it a lot. It's so good. It's so good. And so there you have it. A tale of a band with so much promise, hope, and future, promising a grand project only to have it dashed by internal conflicts, which would then be revealed through an internet troll and then saved by someone else who probably doesn't even live in the same country as them or probably haven't even talked to them before. Just such an interesting, unique album. I love albums that sort of have unique stories, circumstances surrounding them, and New Wilderness is certainly one of those. And the fact that it's a really great album just sort of places it even higher in that regard for me. But I've been Varvis. If you guys know of any other interesting album stories to check out, please go leave that down in the comments. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Check out Alejandro's videos. I really appreciate you guys.